Hello everyone, Salam Alaikum. I'm Kate Jones and I'm really looking forward to delivering this presentation, even though it's digital, but we're quite used to that now after a few months of distance learning. So I will just share the screen with you, but I will be sending out this presentation for anybody who would like a copy of it as well. So what I'm going to talk to you about today, it links in with my second book. So first of all, I should probably say that I do live in Abu Dhabi and I'm head of history at the British School Al Kabairat. And I've authored 2 books. Love to Teach was my first, Retrieval Practice was my second, and I've actually got a few more books on the way, which is very exciting. There's my social media. If you'd like to get in touch with me on Twitter or Instagram or read my blog, then please feel free to do so. But as I said, I thought I would talk about retrieval practice because that's been the focus of my book, and I think it's something that we really need to be talking about when students and teachers return to school with aspects of distance learning and actual learning in school. We don't know what the future holds, but whatever it does hold, retrieval practice will be really important feature of that. So, to begin with, I think it's just really important that we all have a good understanding of what retrieval practice is, because you may or may not be familiar with this term. If you're not familiar with the term, you're probably familiar with the strategy. And this is a really good definition from Dr. Pooja K. Agarwal. She's completed a lot of work. She's a cognitive scientist based in America. And she says it's a learning strategy where we focus on getting information out of the brain. Now, the key thing to remember with retrieval practice is this is just one part of the learning process. We have to ensure that information already gets there first before we can retrieve it. And that links in with the multi-store model of memory. This is from the 60s. There's been a lot of work from the field of cognitive psychology that is now being applied eventually to education. And here you could see we have 2 different types of memory, our short-term working memory, and that is very limited in how much information. I love how I do this, rubbing my brain, but working memory or short-term memory is very limited in regards to how much information we can hold and how long for, in contrast to long-term memory, which we can't put a limit on it in regards to how much and the duration. I mean, you could probably remember things from a very, very long time ago. Some things may be very difficult for you to remember, but they're in your long-term memory, and a cue or a prompt might help you, or a photograph of a song, something might help bring that memory back. And other memories are just simply easier to retrieve from our long-term memory. So retrieval practice is just one aspect of the learning process. Obviously, information has to be encoded and it has to actually get to our long-term memory, and then we have to be able to get it out. And the example that I gave in my book was that I was in a quiz with friends, and there was a question that was asked and I knew the answer, but I couldn't remember it at the time. And I said to my friends, it's there, it's in my long-term memory, I know it is, I just can't retrieve it. And my friend said, well, what good is knowledge and information if it's in your long-term memory but you can't access it? And that is spot on. Students need to be able to access this information quickly and easily. And that is where retrieval practice comes in. Every time you recall something from your memory without support, you are changing that memory. That should make it easier and quicker to retrieve in the future. So as Professor Robert Bjork says, using memory shapes your memory. I absolutely love that quote. You may or may not be familiar with the forgetting curve. This is actually based on the work of Professor Ebbinghaus from Germany in 1885. So you might be rolling your eyes thinking, why is this research being shared? It's very old. Yes, it is. but actually this research I wasn't even aware of when I started teaching in 2010, and this research has been replicated many, many times. And the research tells us, put it very simply, it shows us the curve, the amount of forgetting that can occur over time. But what we need to do is interrupt the forgetting curve with regular retrieval practice. And this is quite difficult to get right, because if we were to ask a student at the end of a lesson what they've learned and ask them questions, there's this false sense of confidence of the teacher and the student to assume that the student has actually learned that material, but really it's in their short-term memory. What we need to do is we need to wait for some time to pass to actually allow some forgetting, and then we need to ask that question. But what we don't want to do is wait too long that the information has been completely forgotten and we need to teach it all over again and the student needs to learn it again. So that is quite difficult. And some people say, well, actually a lot of teachers say to me, you know, how long should I wait before I ask my class a question based on the content? And I say that we should be using retrieval practice. Well, not just I, lots of other teachers and researchers say retrieval practice should be a regular feature of our lessons. But I also think we need to use professional judgment and our own knowledge of the content and of our students when we design quizzes. Here's some work about the forgetting curve from a brilliant website, innerdrive.co.uk. Bushk and Watson are the creators of this website, and they're also the authors of the wonderful book, The Science of Learning, 77 studies that every teacher needs to know. And the forgetting curve is just one of the 77 studies. Now, I think this book is fantastic, not just for teachers, leaders at all levels, whether you're pastoral or academic leader, senior leaders, but I also think this has got a lot of information that students should be aware of and parents should be aware of. And on their website, you can download free infographics that summarize not just research studies, but information about memory, about sleep, about growth mindset, lots of things. It's a fantastic website, and they're on Twitter as well. So please do check them out. So we need to accept that forgetting is part of the process of learning. And obviously, students, when they return, they've had a summer break. And even before that, they had a break from the physical classroom with distance learning. So we need to find out what information they have forgotten or they haven't forgotten. And we need to do this pretty soon when we get back in the classroom. But I don't mean that, or I am not suggesting formal exams, because retrieval practice is about low stakes. It takes away the pressure and the stress, and it's about quizzing and recall rather than a high stakes examination situation, which actually it's going to be challenging when we go back to school. It's going to be very different. We need to think about the well-being of staff and students. So having a high stakes, high pressure exam clearly is not a good thing to do. Having a low stakes quiz will be very important, very useful, and it also can be very enjoyable. So why should we really focus on retrieval when we get back to school? Well, there's a few reasons. These are mainly the benefits of retrieval practice. So the first one is that we should be using this because it's an incredibly powerful learning strategy. There's a huge amount of research that has been carried out about retrieval practice that is overwhelmingly positive and supportive when it comes to using retrieval practice. I'm just going to see if I can, apologies, move my camera because it's blocking a little bit the screen. Oh, okay. So it's very effective. We would probably, my colleagues were, and I'm sure you were using this a lot during distance learning, and it's something we should continue to use. But I think this is one of the main reasons why we should use it in September or August. It will identify gaps in knowledge. We haven't seen our students, we may have seen them via Zoom and had lots of communication with them, but we need to know where the gaps in the knowledge were from that period of distance learning. And the quizzes, going over previously covered material, especially for year groups such as year 11 and year 13, where they are carrying on examination courses. And even at Key Stage 3, you may want to revisit material covered in Term 3. And this is really useful. It will be informative for the student, and it will help the teacher gain an understanding where the gaps in the knowledge are on an individual level with our students, but also at a whole class level as well. Retrieval has been proven to lead to better organisation and transfer of knowledge, and we've got to be careful that we don't have a sense of emergency and we miss a lot of school, we've got to catch up. Actually, this is very unique. Will students ever fully catch up? We don't know. We haven't been in a situation like this before. All we can do is use the most effective strategies and not waste any time. So the fact that it's got these other benefits will be really useful. Also, if we carry out regular retrieval in class, and this has come from research carried out by Jeffrey Karpicki, Megan Sumaraki. You can read more detail about this in their research paper, 10 Benefits of the Testing Effect. Testing effect was what retrieval practice used to be referred to, but then obviously the connotations of testing, we've moved away from that. But if students know that there will be regular quizzes, they're more likely to quiz themselves at home and they can prepare for it. And when they come to revise, if they know that retrieval practice is a good strategy, and if parents know that as well, then they will use this more. So that is an indirect benefit of using retrieval practice that is a really positive reason why we should be using it when we go back to school. Also, regular retrieval can basically lead to a boost in confidence for the teacher and the student. And whilst there's not been a lot of research into this field and more research needs to be carried out, there was a research study carried out, and you can read by this on retrievalpractice.org with Pooja K. Agarwal, which showed that students who carried out regular retrieval practice actually felt a decrease in anxiety and stress when it comes to learning. So that's something we really want. We want students to, we want to build up their confidence. We don't want them to feel anxious because there's plenty of other factors, the fact about the global pandemic, and they will be worried about their learning. But if they know that there are these effective strategies that can help their learning, this may increase their confidence both in the short and long term. But there may be some colleagues or students who are reluctant to use retrieval practice, and we have to push on with it. So these might be some of the things you hear. These are some myths that I've regularly heard about retrieval practice, and hopefully I'll give you some counter arguments for anyone who is opposing this strategy. We've always done it, it's nothing new. I think there's an element of truth in that, but I don't think we've always done retrieval practice well as a profession, or we haven't always spaced it out. So for example, myself, I can't speak for all teachers, I might have asked about what we did last lesson, but not further back. And I might have thought, oh, we can't dwell too much on last lesson, we need to move on. So actually, the idea of recalling information from long-term memory is not new, but how we do that, when we do that, why we do that, a lot of this information is new to teachers and students. So teachers who are dismissive of retrieval practice and say, oh, I've always done it, I've always done it. I'm quite keen to see how they do that, because when you dig a little bit deeper and have conversations with them, they really could be implementing retrieval practice in a more effective way. So I found. We don't have the time for retrieval practice. This could be something that we hear a lot. We've got so much content to get through. Exam classes have missed so many lessons with distance learning. We've had a lot of disruption. Actually, that's even more reason why we should do retrieval practice in lessons. The argument that we don't have time for it, I would then say, as a middle leader, if somebody in my department said, I don't have time for retrieval practice, I would say, right, let's sit down, let's look at a lesson plan and a scheme of work. And actually, is there something that is happening in lessons that could be replaced with retrieval practice because it's more effective than the other strategy? And you'll usually find that you can make time for it, or we should make time for it. This argument, which actually I think we'll hear a lot of, especially because we've just had distance learning, why do we need retrieval practice when we can just Google it? There will be more emphasis on using technology, both in and outside of the classroom. Technology is wonderful, but there are barriers and issues when it comes to technology, and we don't want our students just to be able to Google everything. And they may have been reliant on Google during distance learning because obviously learning was more flexible, the teacher wasn't there, but now we need to put the shift back onto retrieving information from their long-term memory and not becoming reliant on Google or any other search engine. Retrieval is just a knowledge test. It kills creativity in the classroom. That is not true, and that is one of the reasons why I wanted to write my book. And even if you haven't read my book or you don't want to read my book, if you visit my Twitter account or my website lovetoteach87.com, I have shared lots of free templates for very creative retrieval tasks, from challenge grids, cops and robbers, verbal opportunities, pair work, individual, quizzing. There's so many ways, and that's why I love retrieval practice as well. It's very flexible and adaptable for the classroom. It certainly doesn't kill creativity. From my experience, it's inspired me to actually become more creative in the classroom. And then finally there's a misconception, and I think this hasn't been helped by school policies, that retrieval practice should be at the start of a lesson. And schools are saying every lesson must start with 5 minutes retrieval practice. The problem with that is that actually you are doing a real disservice to retrieval practice by limiting it to 5 minutes. And also this is where things start to go wrong. And I can understand retrieval practice is a great way to start a lesson. And Rosenshine's Principles of Instruction suggests starting a lesson with about 8 minutes review. But if you want to dedicate quality time to retrieval practice and feedback and class discussion, then you will need more than 5 minutes. And that might not be at the start of a lesson. That might be mid-lesson as a transition between two topics. It may be at the end of a lesson. But again, remember what I mentioned before about working memory. But at the end of a lesson, you might have questions from a few lessons back or from term 3. So yes, retrieval practice is great at the start of a lesson. It doesn't have to be just at the start. You could use it another time, or you could use it another point instead of. I have not read any research that says retrieval practice is more effective at the start of a lesson. If anyone has encountered any research that says that, please do share it with me. But as I've said, I try and stay on the ball with retrieval practice research. And I've read a lot in preparation for my book. And I continue to read a lot about retrieval practice. And it doesn't say that. It's just something that we've decided as a profession. I don't know where as I said, maybe it's come from Rosenshine. But it doesn't have to be just at the start. Okay then, so where can we go wrong? Well, I've already said about if we just use it at the start of the lesson, and that links in with this. If we're simply using retrieval practice for, I don't think ADEC have said that it is a requirement, but if we were using it for the wrong reasons, using it when a member of SLT came into a classroom, or just for observation or just for inspection, and not genuinely embracing it as part of our classroom practice, that is where we will go wrong with it. Now, I, before COVID, went to visit a school in the UK, and on my tour of the school, lots of the teachers, when I entered the classroom, just stopped and started doing retrieval practice. And I think that's because they know I wrote a book about retrieval practice. And that was pretty much all I saw. And as I've said, there's a lot more to learning than just retrieval practice. And it's fine, I understand that teachers would have liked me to give them feedback on retrieval practice, but it's when we have a culture of stop what we're doing, let's do retrieval practice because we have a visitor in the room, that's where we're going wrong with any type of strategy when we behave like that. Okay, not enough time dedicated to question design. It said the focus is on task design. So my book, I just have the templates available that you can download from my website or my TS page. You don't have to spend much time on the task, but where you need to spend the time is thinking about your subject and your students and getting the right level of challenge. So this is where it can be time consuming, and this is where it's good to work together with your colleagues in your department or your phase. As I've just said, to get the level of challenge just right. This is desirable difficulties based on the work of Robert and Elizabeth Bjork. If it's too easy, students can switch off. If it's too hard, students will never achieve success. And then this obviously links in with motivation as well. I give the example often of a video game, a PlayStation or Xbox game, which starts off at level 1, relatively easy, and it gives the player a taste of success very quickly, which can give them confidence, and it can also motivate them to keep playing. And then obviously the level of challenge increases. What we need to do with retrieval practice is provide opportunities for retrieval success, but we also need to make sure that not all of our questions are just about allowing opportunities for retrieval success. There also needs to be an appropriate level of challenge as well. This is another point that links into what I've already said, not providing enough time for review, feedback and reflection. If I were to write my book again, if there was a version 2, I would have a chapter on feedback with retrieval practice. There are lots of ways that we can do this. Obviously, if it's a digital quiz and it's multiple choice, that the questions will be marked for you and the student instantly, which is great for workload. Dylan Willem has said previously, the best person to mark a test is the person who's just taken the test. So we can do lots of self-assessment and marking and review. And then we can have obviously whole class discussion and feedback as well. So I think that's really important. And then when you do limited retrieval practice to 5 minutes and stick the answers on the board, it's not as valuable. Let's just say a multiple choice quiz where a student has got 13 out of 15, but they didn't even look to where they got the 2 wrong. They don't know where they went wrong. And actually, whilst it was still a powerful retrieval activity, it's so important that they do identify the gaps in their knowledge. And then finally, too much focus on factual recall. This is an important aspect of retrieval practice, but again, it's a bit of a myth. And I will share some activities that focus on vocabulary, concepts, as well as just, for example, in my subject, retrieval practice isn't just about remembering key dates. There's a lot more to retrieval practice. People who say that retrieval practice is just preparing students for pub quizzes, I think they just show a real lack of understanding about what retrieval practice actually is. So we can have 2 types of retrieval practice: multiple choice, where there's choice of answers that students have to select, or free recall, where there's no support or no cues, students have to remember completely from memory. There's pros and cons to each of these strategies. So with multiple choice questions, my advice would be to design questions very carefully, so that it's not just really easy, but also we don't want well, multiple choice is a form of recognition rather than retrieval in one sense. Or you could just do power of elimination. Well, I know it's not that one, not that one, not that one, it must be that one. Okay, so we need to think very carefully when we're doing multiple choice questions, because there's potential for guesswork, but multiple choice can lead to lots of retrieval success, good for building student confidence, good for addressing common misconceptions in the classroom with knowledge. Free recall. If I was to ask a student to do a brain dump activity, write down everything you know about this topic, and they literally just have pen and paper, or they're doing it digitally, and they have no support. And this is harder, it requires more effort, but it's more challenging, therefore making it more effective in the long term. This is great for the teacher. We don't have to do lots of prepping and planning. It's very minimal in regards to workload. Unless you are marking it, then that's where the focus will shift, and you will have to give detailed feedback. If you were to read a page of information in comparison to multiple choice, which are very easy for marking. Sometimes answers can be vague and general and not relevant, because if they haven't got any support or guidance, then students can go off topic. So I still think, whilst not having support, we just need to be very specific with our instructions. And I will give an example. So if you want to read more about effective use of multiple choice questions, then I recommend visiting the website of Blake Harvard. I wrote about him in my book. There's his Twitter handle, Effortful Educator. He's doing some amazing work. And there's an example there of free recall. I tweeted it from the BSAC history account, where students had to write down what they remember about housecarls, well, different types of soldiers, and then they illustrated it. Explain it, illustrate it, which is a good use of what we call dual coding, combining images and visuals. But how much support should we provide? This is an example of free recall. Now, if I just show this to my Year 8 class and say, write down everything you know about Henry VIII, what will likely happen with some students, and I know this based on my experiences, is that they will describe this portrait. Oh, Henry VIII was king and he was overweight. that tends to pop up a lot, and they might describe how he dressed. They may also include some information that he had 6 wives, but we've gone from a free recall retrieval activity to more of a description based. And they may say he had 6 wives, but last week we were learning about the break with Rome, but yet they haven't mentioned that. And I'm frustrated, but actually I didn't ask them to write with a break with Rome about that, so it's not their fault. So I created this this is an activity which provides some support but minimal support. Okay, I called it picture prompt, and they have to write from memory what they can about each image or icon and how it's linked to Henry VIII. So we have the crown, we have the ring, the divorce, we have the Pope, the break with Rome, we have money, the profit he made from the dissolution of the monasteries, we have the issue of religion. So there we've got free recall with prompts to be much more specific, but it's still challenging and it's still effortful. And also the younger students are, the more support and guidance they need as well. Again, this is what is happening in this picture. Can you describe it and add additional information? So this is to promote retrieval success. So if a student was really struggling to remember the Battle of Stamford Bridge, there's enough in the picture that they could describe soldiers fighting on a bridge. I can see the Axeman, I can see people in the water, but actually there may be things that it's not included in the image that they can remember from memory. So there's lots of ways that we can adapt retrieval practice. And something that I really missed in distance learning that I didn't do, but there are ways to do it, was verbal retrieval. And we did have some Zoom sessions where I did ask questions, but it just wasn't the same. This is a retrieval placemat. I can project up on the board, or you can print off however you want, and it's just a prompt for questioning. But as a teacher, this is something that we do constantly in the classroom. We're asking questions, and we need, I think, when we go back and we're in a classroom situation, to do this. Or if we're in a distance learning environment, then we need to try and come up with opportunities for verbal retrieval rather than just the emphasis on written. And as I said, retrieval practice can focus on vocabulary. This is my keyword spotlight, which you can, if you just Google Kate Jones keyword spotlight, you can download this template for free. Democracy is the keyword in the spotlight. They have to define it from memory, use it correctly in a sentence, illustrate it, dual coding, what are the keywords are connected, and then at the bottom they self-assess their understanding. This could be done with a textbook and with teacher support. It doesn't have to be a retrieval task, but if it's going to be a retrieval task, then no support, take that away. Here's my challenge grid. Basically, it's a series of different questions that don't just cover last lesson, but they cover last week, 2 weeks ago, further back. This is what we need to be doing when we go back to school, especially going over that content from the distance learning period. This could be an activity that could really help with that. And then also, if we are using lots of technology, quizzes is, in my opinion, the greatest online quizzing tool. Now at BSAC, we do use Google. The students have Google Chromebooks, and I have found in distance learning the benefits of Google Forms. I love Google Forms, so I think it depends on your context. But quizzes is great. It's free. All you need to do is sign up via email if you haven't done so already. And these are the reasons why I think it's so good. And I'm not sponsored by them. I genuinely think it's a brilliant website. First of all, it's really user-friendly. That's important. When we think about cognitive overload, we don't want students to be focusing on how does the technology work. It needs to be quick and easy so that they can focus on the content and what's being asked of them. Also, the teleport feature, I love this. If you're creating a quiz on a specific topic, you can search in the search bar. If a teacher has already created a quiz on it, but you might not like all their questions, you can just teleport their questions to your quiz. Once you've teleported them, you can adapt it or you can change to multiple choice answers, but it's brilliant for workload. Also, another workload feature, it provides instant feedback for both the teacher and the student. You can look at students on an individual level, or you can look at it, there's all the data there from a class overview, which is useful. You can remove the leaderboard feature so that students aren't competing against one another. You can keep it, but you can remove it. It will remove that element of competition against others, but if you have the same students who are constantly in the top 3, then you should really think about the impact that that perhaps could be having on the rest of the class. Also, I hate question timers. We don't want students to rush their answers. We want them to read the question carefully. But when there's more points at stake for the quicker you answer, it does encourage students to rush. So I think this is a really great feature, remove the question timer. You can insert images, like I had the picture prompts. You can now have opportunities for free recall where they type in longer answers, but again, the teacher will have to mark that. You can add maths equations, audio clips for MFL, or just check it out, explorequizzes.com. They're always adding to it. And actually, if there was something that you wish they did, you could easily contact them. I've messaged them on Twitter because originally they didn't used to do free recall, and Google Forms has multiple choice and free recall. I thought that was great that you could use both. So I've mentioned it to quizzes, as I said, other people, and they've listened to it, they've acted on it. So they're really keen to hear from teachers about how they could continually improve their website. So further reading about retrieval practice, I've referenced both of these. Pooja K. Agarwal, cognitive scientist, has teamed up with teacher Patrice Bain to write Powerful Teaching. It's not just about retrieval practice, it's about metacognition, feedback, space practice, lots of areas. And then The Science of Learning. For me, it is the best book in education. I absolutely love it. It's had a huge impact on my teaching, but also as a form tutor, as a middle leader, I cannot recommend it enough. And some blogs as well that you can easily access, because I know books can be challenging out here at times. Tom Sherrington's done so much great work around retrieval practice and Rosenshine. Adam Boxer, he's great. He does have a science background, but I find his blogs useful and interesting. And then The Learning Scientists, they've got a book, they've got podcasts, they've got blogs, they've got videos, not just retrieval, but dual coding, elaboration, lots of other things. So really do check out their website. And then that's it. Shukran. Thank you very much. I hope this was useful. And if you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch with me.